Right, I'm sure we can all identify with that short video in some way or another. I'm sure we've all made a mess in one way or another. And this Sunday we begin a new series that is called Address the Mess. And there was a verse there that Caroline read, Romans 3:23. And when I first heard it, it was before I made a commitment to follow Jesus Christ. And somebody sort of gave this verse and thought it'd make an impact. All have sinned and fall short of the glory of God. And it didn't make any sense to me at all. And had no impact on me. And so I want to try and make this verse relatable and relevant this morning, because sin is always a mess. And here we go. So, address the mess. We've got 4 in the series. I'm going to do the mess in the mirror today, and then Simon will do these 3 as we work them out. So, best mess ever. That actually talks about salvation, and we read in those verses that Jesus comes, and through his relationship with him, we're sort of saved out of the mess. Inside Out is more about discerning the best way ahead for us. How to live the best life that we can and be the best that we can be. And Messier speaks for itself. Ever made a mess messier? Ever said to yourself, I thought I'd help, but it actually made things worse. And, it's that sort of scenario. And we look at it through the story, very familiar story in the Old Testament, of David and Saul. So, as I say, there's a lot of good practical stuff in this. And so, over the next month, we're going to try and address this head on. And we're not going to try and sweep anything under the carpet. We're going to have a go at how we can address the mess. And I tried to think about this. How many of you get stressed by mess? Yes, quite a few hands. Stressed by mess? I don't. To be honest, I have to admit that. Some of us, have to have everything tidy, neat as a pin before we can work. And the doorbell goes, and I look around. Oh, I've got to tidy up quickly. Make everything's all right before somebody comes in. Or maybe we don't see the mess. Maybe we probably caused it. Stuff all around. All the dishes are there. In the evening in the sink, ready to be washed. Never mind. Just leave it, and I sleep quite soundly. Thank you. So. There we are. And then, not giving anything away here, but the issue regarding mess, when I was a minister in Bulwell and Sutton, the issue was my study. And, ministers dump. You come in and maybe from a pastor visit, meeting, whatever, and oh, Dad, can you do this, the other? Or somebody called, did you? All right, dump that there. Right, deal with this. And then you cut that. I'll put this thing here. And so my study, if one of my daughters walked in, or probably Catherine as well, you say, look, how can you work in this mess? And you sort of, I'm quite happy, thank you. But anyway, they say, can I tidy up for you? No, don't touch anything. I know where everything is, it's there. And when we moved to Hucknall, we had to seriously downsize after we retired. They finally got their hands on my study, and oh gosh, sort of look at a whole filing cabinet. Anything in here, Dad? There might be one or two things. Right, all go. Anyway, but the mess, but a mess can be all sorts of things. It could be a financial mess. Unexpected payment or a bigger bill, or so. I turn to the credit card, and you think, oh yeah, I'll pay that off later, I'm sure. And then something else creeps in, and before we know where we are, we've got a bit of a mess. Or it could be a relational mess. I don't know if it's a good phrase or not, but we sometimes talk about a messy divorce. Or sometimes, there's been a big fallout and we don't speak to people for years. Relational mess, health mess. Maybe you've not looked after yourself. Maybe I had a hip replacement operation 10 years ago now, and when I came out of hospital, they gave me an 8-page little booklet thing with lots of exercises and lots of things that I had to do. And, I wanted to get back and fit and going to the gym again as soon as I could. So I did everything. I looked through everything. There was these things you were meant to do before you get out of bed, these exercises. When you did, you had to put your hand on your wardrobe and to move your leg and all this stuff. So I did it all. And then I went to my first appointment for my physio after the operation, and I was sitting there waiting to go in, and there was 3 other guys there, and these 2 guys were talking, and one said, "Oh, have you done any of those exercises then?" They go, "Oh no, I haven't bothered with that. No, nor have I." And I'm thinking, you're going to be in a mess, and it won't help the NHS either. And we all have this common, whether we've got faith or not, whether we follow Jesus or not, life is just messy. And sometimes it's messy because we've created the mess. Sometimes we inherit messes. Someone else has caused it and we get drawn into it. But, this is the way of life. Life happens that way. And mess, in a funny sort of way, brings us together. And I want to sort of say this, that the mess, it is. The messiness of life is what brings us together. Because that verse that I didn't understand all those years ago said, all have gone astray. All have got involved in a mess. All have messed up and gone astray. And we're all involved in this, and we need to be able to know how to address it. And I just want to throw something in here which isn't quite really strictly what I was going to talk about this morning, but I want to add it in. It's about when we see somebody else's mess. And I think it's important, this, is that, sometimes we look at a situation, look at a person, and you think, well, you look at them, they're about to make a decision, and you think, you're going to make a big mess of that situation, or you sometimes think, well, if you do that, you're going to regret that, or if you continue to do that, you're going to regret it. And Sometimes we need to look at ourselves, and before we are critical of others, we need to remember that actually we're a mess ourselves and can get ourselves into a mess. And when it comes to people around us whose lives are messy, we should be students, not critics. Because what we need to know is there will be a story behind somebody's mess. And it's really important to hear the story behind somebody's mess, because then if we're listeners, we will see them differently. And I, over the years, have met and tried to help many or hundreds of homeless people. When I had my churches in Poole in Dorset, a lot of homeless people make their way to the south coast. And churches together in Poole ran a thing called Roots to Roots, R-O-U-T-E-S to R-O-O-T-S. And 25 churches. And we went out every night, Monday through to Sunday. Every night we were in Poole under an underpass where homeless people gathered. And my churches, we had Saturday night. That was our night. I used to go down monthly on a Saturday evening. And I met quite a lot of ex-servicemen. About 20% of people who are homeless have been in the military. And this one chap, if you just looked at him, you think, wow, he's a mess. And he was not well shaven, his hair was in a mess, his clothes were in a mess. And so I got talking to him, we served him some soup and bread and stuff like that. And his backstory was that he suffered from post-traumatic stress syndrome. He'd done 2 tours in Afghanistan. And when he got home, this was really bad, this PTSD, as we call it. And he said, somebody was digging on the road with a drill. It really upset him. He couldn't control his feelings and emotions. And he tried to get a job in a factory, but because of the noise again, he'd have panic attacks. And so he had to leave that job. And then, of course, his children, his wife, he wasn't the same person as what left that came home. And his wife said, look, the kids can't cope with this. And so she asked him to leave. And I think he realized, so he left, and he ended up homeless. And that was his backstory. And then I thought, well, I know we've heard about Help the Heroes, but there's about 50 odd charities that help ex-servicemen. So I said, if you come down to the Baptist church in the High Street on Tuesday, we run a session. And I said, there'll be somebody who can help you. Because you need to hear the backstory so that, it's easy to make judgment, easy to be critical of other people's messes. And it's important to believe, the best in others, when we know their story. And Jesus had something to say about this. Do not judge, or you too will be judged. For in the same way as you judge others, you will be judged. And with the measure you use, it will be measured to you. So the standard you use in judging people is the standard by which you are judged. So when we see a mess in other people's lives, don't judge, be critical, unless really that's how you want people to be viewing your life. And Jesus goes on, verse 3, why do you look at the speck of sawdust in your brother's eye, but pay no attention to the plank in your own eye? And actually this comes from the Sermon on the Mount, and Catherine and I have been watching a series called The Chosen, and it's about the life and ministry of Jesus Christ. And it's very, very good. Very interesting the way they depict it, probably the best I've seen. And, when Jesus did the Sermon on the Mount, there'd been a lot of preparation before, crowds gathered and all that, but they would be laughing at this. In the Sermon on the Mount, there'd be a lot of banter. And, when Jesus said, look, why do you look at the speck of sawdust in your brother's eye, not pay attention to the plank in your own? Deliberate over-exaggeration. So Jesus is saying, don't go around addressing other people's messes unless you want them to judge you. So address the mess. And some messes are actually very hard to get out of by ourselves, and we do need others. Sometimes I've got myself in a real hole here, and I'm not sure how to get out of it. We do need each other. We've already heard about Renew 34, and an example of that chap in Paul I came across, one of many, and we all have messes in our lives. And if we can come alongside and support, I think there's real power in that, because we're all in the same boat. And this is where we're going to go with this passage in a moment. Because the mess that brought us together is the mess that brought God near. God loves the messy people in the world. And he sent Jesus Christ, his only Son, into the world because of that. That's really good news, because God saw the mess that we are in and sent his Son to address the mess. God is not aloof. God is not separate. God is not out there and beyond. He gets involved. And I had a very, very interesting discussion with a Hindu friend of mine about this. So I played hockey for many years, and a lot of Asians play hockey. And when I was in Bingley, we had 11 players on a field, but there were Muslims, Sikhs, Hindus, Christians, those of no faith. We were an interesting, eclectic group. And we used to have fantastic discussions about faith, having a drink after the game. And anyway, this chap was a friend of mine, and we were talking. It was Easter time, and I was just talking. We were just talking about Easter, and he asked me what it all meant, and I said about Jesus coming into this world and dying on a cross for our mess to help us get out of it. And he said, I could never believe that. He said, God has to be holy and pure. And he said, if God comes into this world and is touched by it, he can no longer remain holy and pure. So he said, for me, that doesn't work. God's got to be right outside of this world. And I said, yeah, but he remains holy and pure because Jesus Christ is the Son of God. But he just couldn't get it. So that one, we moved on to something else. But God gets involved. He understands the tensions we face and the mess we get into. And God showed his mercy. And mercy means he did something about it. So mercy is not sympathy. I can sympathize with you or a situation, and that's as far as it goes. But if I'm merciful, if I show mercy, it means I do something about it. And this is what God did to address the mess. Jesus came born into a mess. Jesus came into the world and experienced what you and I experience. So God understands. God knows and part of the mess of this world. And he did not shy away from the mess. And, thinking about my Hindu friend, I said to him, this is the power of Christianity. And Jesus spent time with messy people. It's where the Gospels usually say, tax collectors and sinners. It's women who sold their bodies for sex. Probably they had no option, but, those who the religious leaders thought were messy and dirty and needed to be avoided, Jesus spent time with them. And that's why some people found it difficult to recognize him when he came. But God looked on earth at this mess. And he did not judge or condemn. So when Jesus enters the world, he does not come to judge. He comes, it's a big word, with his grace. He comes. Grace means God gives his all to those who deserve nothing. God gives his Son to us who don't live perfect lives, who will mess up again. He came to not judge, but to give us, through his grace, an opportunity to take hold by faith of what Jesus has done, to come into the mess and said, look, come and follow me and we'll walk out of it. And you can have a life lived with me, says Jesus. You can be free of all the mess. We use the word saved from it. It doesn't mean that we'll never mess up again, but it does mean I'm walking with Jesus now, and I can take hold of his grace, and I can be forgiven, and he can lift me up, and he can heal me, and I can walk on God's highway again. So I need God. If I'm aware of the mess, any of us, whether we've got faith or not, if I'm aware of the mess, I need God, because he has come into the mess to address the mess, and he's come for me. And if I got an awareness of the mess, and God will come into it, then I'm either following God or I'm one step away from following God. Okay, we're going to get into the passage now. A little bit about this thing called the law. Now, this was written by the Apostle Paul, who was a great apostle to the Gentiles. And Paul's a very interesting character. He was a Jewish religious leader, a Pharisee, a very learned man who opposed Christianity in the beginning, and actually stalked and went after Christians, but had an encounter with Jesus Christ on a road between Jerusalem and Damascus, we call it, and Jesus addressed him personally. And Paul changed. But what he brought behind him was a lot of knowledge, intellect, into bringing the good news to those who are outside the Jewish faith. So the law commands many things. We know that those commands are for those who are under the law. And we can think of that. I mean, we are under the laws of this land. We have an election this week, and there will be new laws passed. So we come under the laws of this land. Or if you drive a car, there's a highway code. There's some laws, there's some standards, to which, we live under. And this is really, the law here is a reminder of standards. If I'm a follower of Jesus or not, or whether I follow my conscience, there's a standard. And something higher, than what I think, really, a standard by which we're called to live by. And the law here really is law in a religious sense. So it could be the law of the Old Testament, the Jewish law. 663 of them, and people used to memorize them, and they would know if they'd broken them. Or if I'm a follower of the Lord Jesus Christ, he brought a law, commandment into our lives. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your souls, with all your mind, and love your neighbor as yourself. It's simple. A new commandment I give unto you, said Jesus. Love one another as I have loved you. That's what we live by. The law. If you're not a follower of Jesus, you probably know that your conscience will sometimes prick you, tell you what you shouldn't do. But we are accountable. And we know we don't meet that standard. And we'll keep messing up. So Paul goes on further in the letter. Those who are under the law. This stops all excuses and brings the whole world under God's judgment, because we have an inclination, don't we, to make an excuse. Sometimes I mess up, and someone says, well, who did that? Come on, who did that? And I thought, blow that, I'm not going to own up to it. I know I did it, but, you make excuses. I used to hate it at school when I used to be in those situations where, somebody's got in the class, and just throw something at the blackboard or whatever, make a bit of a mess. Teacher comes in, who did that? No one owned up to it. And they do this thing at the end of the class. I'm not letting any of you go until the person who's done this owns up. And I think, this is crazy. We're all going to stand there ages, because no one's going to tittle-tattle. And then there was a brilliant thing once where I had a girl in our class called Penelope. She was very, very clever, a kid who never did anything wrong. So anyway, we'd sort of stood there. It's probably a couple of minutes, but it seemed ages. And this guy was sent front. Look, you can't go. I know the bells go until somebody goes. So she put her hand up. It was me. And I could tell he was shocked. So anyway, it's all right, you can go. So we went. So she went up to him. So he said, well, I'm surprised. She said, it wasn't me who did it, but I just put my hand up because it's so ridiculous. So we'd all go out. Don't make excuses about this, because we are going to trip up. And this isn't about the gloom. This isn't a gloomy thing. This is about the point of the struggle. Does not make it. This doesn't. The whole world stops. This stops all excuses. Bring the whole world under God's judgment. It's not to make us feel bad, or to try harder, or to give up, or to try and be more perfect. It is to show that we need God and that God is near. So the last bit here, because no one can be right with God by following the law. This last bit is really important. The law only shows us our sin. You can try to be good, to be accepted by God, and you'll never hit the standard. Because God doesn't accept people just because they obey a law. What the law does, it points out our sin. In other words, there's some sort of standard I follow. And, so the law of Christ, I am to love others. I am to forgive others. Invest in others. Step in to support others. And actually, that's a very high and holy calling. And try as hard as I might, I will mess up. I'll fall. So this verse is a bit like a mirror, saying that nobody is perfect. Nobody hits it. That includes me. That includes all of us. Nobody is perfect. And I came across this, nearly didn't use it. If it comes up, beast. All right. There is a perfect that nobody is. And I came across that, and it just says, that's probably right. There is a perfect, well, maybe Jesus Christ, perfect. There is a perfect, none of us are going to hit that standard of being perfect. I'm in a mess. And somehow, I need somebody, please, like Jesus Christ, to come and address that mess. And I want to say to him, I can't save myself out of this mess. Come on, Jesus. Come into my life, and I'll walk with you. And then we'll walk through this life together. I'm going to jump ahead now to the verse that I talked about at the beginning. All have sinned and are not good enough for God's glory. So the law is the reference point for the mess, how we should behave or encourages us to escape that habit if it's annoying, or get a hold of that addiction if it's something we need to really get out of. An awareness of the mess leads us, to something inside that, we are accountable. And you don't try harder and harder. It is by grace. God gives his all, his son. He treats us better than we deserve. He doesn't point the finger, shake his head in disbelief at our mess or criticize it. He is a God of mercy. As I said, mercy is more than sympathy. God does something about it. We're not getting what we deserve. He is a God of grace. I'm getting what I don't deserve. I'm getting Jesus Christ. That the very last bit there, grace, people are made right with God, the red bit, by his grace, which is what? A free gift. So take hold of it. They're made right with God by being made free from sin, from the mess, from the stuff I can't get out of, from my wrongdoing, from the big hole I can't get out of, free from all that through Jesus Christ. So we freely accept him as the Son of God who came into this world, into all the mess, and addresses it and says to us, come and follow me. And we say, yes, Jesus, I know I can't get out of it by myself, trying to be perfect, trying to work harder. I'll accept it by grace, by faith. Come on, I'll walk with you. And I know you'll help me, and you'll not judge me or criticize me. And, and mercy and grace and following Jesus, that's a brilliant thing. So we can walk God's way. And today is the invitation from the one who is over us and above us and beyond us, and that is God himself. The invitation today is to be accepted into his family, to be loved by him, to be forgiven for the mess we have made in our own lives, which often then draws us into other people's messes as well. And God can do that because of Jesus. So why did Jesus come? To address the mess made in our lives. If we've dug a hole too big to get out of, that's why we need Jesus. All we need to do is to recognize God in the mess, accept his grace, because all of us fall short. And that's why Jesus came for us. And so today, that's the invitation. And it may be a first-time thing, or it may be something I renew, or something I have to acknowledge wherever I am in my life of faith. So today, take hold of ministry. If you're in a bit of a mess and you think, actually, today is the day I need prayer. I've got myself in a bit of a hole here. I've got myself in a bit of a situation here. There'll be people with the purple lanyards. I think it's Hazel and Sally today will be over there. And they can pray for you. Or if they're tied up, you'll know who you can trust to pray for you. So Simon is going to continue this next week and develop from John 3:17 about salvation. But that's where we are today. So I do hope you can come next week or join us online as some people are. Make sure that you follow this thing through. Let's worship. Thank you.